Hello, welcome to review lecture 4. Okay, so we've gone through some of the lectures. So the review number 1 is on primary teeth and development, and then from there, from review number 2, that's when you have the actual dental anatomic structures. Okay, so today we're going to review, going to continue. Okay, this one is these are 60 to 62 slides. All right, so make sure you I hope you guys have eaten and come along for the ride. All right, now remember, all these review lectures are very high yield, so everything which is presented here, just make sure you know it. Okay, all right. So, and of course, you can pass along this website here, dboardexam.com. And if you have any questions, the email address is dentalboard. So it's dentalboard at dboardexam.com. Okay, that's the email address if you have any questions. All right, so now let's we reviewed the anterior teeth already, so now we're going to start with the posterior teeth. These are maxillary posterior teeth. Okay, so in the proximal view, okay, in the proximal view, the crowns of maxillary posterior teeth are roughly trapezoidal, as you can see here in the picture here. Okay, so that's in the proximal view. Just remember, whenever I say in the proximal view, trapezoidal. All right, and the base of the trapezoid is at the cervical. Okay, the base of the trapezoid is at the cervical, and the buccal and lingual surfaces converge towards the occlusal. Okay, now remember, in the anterior teeth, when you look in the facial view, it's going to be a trapezoidal, but the trapezoid, okay, the base of the trapezoid is at the incisor or the occlusal. Okay, so make sure you know where the base of the trapezoid is in this teeth. Okay, very high healed stuff. All right, so maxillary first premolars, occlusal view. Okay, as you can see in the picture here, maxillary first premolars, I cannot stress enough. Okay, these are my favorite teeth, and of course, for the purpose of boards, they have to be your favorite teeth too, so that you know the anatomy. But it has very good anatomy, which as a dentist you can appreciate. Okay, so the lingual cusp inclines to the mesial on the maxillary premolars, and the lingual cusp tip is offset to the mesial. As you can see on the dot here, the blue dot. Okay, you can see that the cusp tip. Okay, so this is the lingual side. This is lingual. This is buccal. Okay, so you can see that on the lingual side, if you draw a line bisecting the tooth, you can see that the lingual cusp tip is offset slightly to the mesial side. Okay, it's almost towards the mesial. Okay, slightly, not too much. So when you're doing your wax up, you have to make sure that that anatomy there, the lingual cusp tip is a little bit towards the mesial. Okay. Now, the crown's occlusal outline on maxillary premolars is a hexagon. Okay. As you can see, it's a hexagon. And the occlusal outline is bounded by, okay, 6 ridges, meaning six sides, okay. And of course, these are the sides, because it's a hexagon, okay. And you have that, okay. So 6 sides. Now, the mesial-marginal groove is present, okay. As you can see, the blue line there, that's the mesial-marginal groove. The mesial-marginal groove, or the maxillary premolars, is continuous with the central groove. Okay, so this blue line here goes over. Okay, the blue line is a mesial-marginal groove which extends over the mesial-marginal ridge. Okay, and then extends over to the root, and we're going to see that. Extends over to the root. And this mesial-marginal groove is continuous with the central, okay, the central fossa. All right, or the mesial pit. Okay, the fossa, or the central groove, or the mesial pit. Okay. All right. So make sure you know everything on this maxillary first premolar. Okay. So mandibular premolars, occlusal outline, with the exception of the white type, mandibular second premolar, the occlusal outline of the mandibular premolars can be described as 6-sided, okay, a hexagon. So you have the occlusal outline of maxillary first premolar, and the occlusal outline of mandibular premolars is a hexagon, okay, except for the white type mandibular second premolar, okay. So hexagon occlusal outline, okay. And the 6 sides are the mesial and distal ridges of the buccal cusp, the mesial marginal ridge, the distal marginal ridge, and the mesial and distal ridges of the lingual cusps, okay. So you have to make sure to know that the cusp is formed where the buccal ridges, okay, meet, or the lingual ridges, okay. Those are the cusp. All right, so this is a maxillary first premolar, because you have a groove on the mesial marginal ridge, and it's connecting with the central groove, okay. So the central groove on the maxillary first premolar unites with the mesial marginal groove at the mesial pit, okay. Remember, the central groove and the mesial marginal groove meet or unite, okay, at the mesial pit, and the mesial pit is going to be right here, okay. So you have the green, which is the mesial marginal groove, and then you have the yellow, which is the central groove, and they are meeting where there's a red dot over there, which is the mesial pit. Okay, very high-heeled stuff here, okay. For this reason, the central groove has been described as extending onto the mesial surface of the crown. So now it looks like it's a continuous yellow line, because it looks like it's a continuous groove, okay. Now, this is an example of the maxillary first premolar. So the maxillary premolars are the only teeth which routinely bulk to the mesial, okay. High-heeled stuff. So they bulk to the mesial. So which teeth routinely bulk to the mesial is the maxillary first premolars, okay. As you can see here, as you can see, the lingual cusp is more towards the mesial side. Okay, so it's like leaning or curved towards the mesial. And the distal lingual line angle, okay, the distal lingual line angle is rounded. So that's where the arrow, the green arrow, is here. You can see that line angle is nicely rounded or less distinct, and the mesial lingual line angle is more square. Okay, all these things you're supposed to memorize. And the Buccal view of the maxillary first premolar. So in the mesial ridge of the buccal cusp is longer. All right, the mesial ridge of the buccal cusp is longer than the distal ridge. Remember that, the mesial ridge of the buccal cusp, not just the mesial ridge of anything, but the mesial ridge of the buccal cusp is longer than the distal ridge of the buccal cusp. Okay, this is the buccal view. All right, and this is different from canines, okay, and other premolars. This is a favorite board question. All right, and so meaning it's opposite in the canines and premolars. In the canines and premolars, the distal, okay, the distal ridge of the buccal cusp is longer than the mesial ridge of the buccal cusp. But in the maxillary first premolars, the mesial ridge is longer than the distal ridge of the buccal cusp. All right, and in the facial view, another favorite board question, okay. In the facial view, the crown resembles that of a canine. All right. And the buccal outline of the crown of the maxillary premolar is pentagonal. Okay, just like the canine. Because this tooth resembles a canine, the buccal outline is a pentagonal, and the canine also, when you look at the facial view, the outline is pentagonal. All right, keep that in mind. And the buccal view, maxillary first premolars. So the distal curvature on the buccal root is more prominent. Okay, as you can see. So remember, maxillary first premolars have two roots, and the distal curvature on the buccal root, all right, is prominent. So you can see here a distal curvature here. Okay, so this one here. All right, and the buccal cusp, okay, the buccal cusp and the mesial cusp, the mesial cusp ridge is longer than the distal cusp ridge, as we mentioned before. Okay. So the mesial view of maxillary first premolars. So the mesial concavity, which is showed by the green arrow here, is found in the middle third. The mesial concavity is found in the middle third of the cervical portion of the crown. All right. The mesial concavity is found in the middle third of the cervical portion of the crown. All right. And of course, you have the mesial concavity communicates with the root concavity. You have to keep that in mind. All right. The mesial concavity communicates with the mesial concavity, meaning this crown concavity here, when you see this outline here, you have a concavity, and it extends all the way here. Okay, so that's why they say it communicates with the root. Which tooth has the mesial concavity communicating with the root concavity? I say maxillary first premolar. Okay, And bifurcated root is the most common type of the root form. Okay, two. So I have two roots usually. So the mesial view of the maxillary premolar, first premolar, you have a mesial concavity, which is depicted by the dotted line there, and two roots are the most common, and you have a mesial marginal groove. You see that? So the mesial marginal groove here extends onto the root concavity. All right. Which tooth has a mesial marginal groove extending onto mesial concavity? Maxillary first premolar. Okay. The occlusal outline of maxillary second premolar is more rounded than that of the maxillary first premolar. Okay. So it's more rounded. Okay, the maxillary second premolar has a more rounded occlusal outline when you compare it to the maxillary first premolar. Very high healed, okay? And the central groove is shorter than that of the first premolar and may occasionally be absent. So sometimes the central groove in the maxillary the maxillary second premolar may be absent. So you have to keep that in mind. And these teeth, usually they may have multiple grooves or supernumerary grooves. Okay, that's another favorite question. So a common anomaly of the maxillary second premolar is numerous accessory ridges and grooves. All right. So when it has multiple ridges and grooves, it appears to be wrinkled. So as you can see, it has some ridges and grooves here, and so it's going to appear like it's wrinkled, a wrinkled face. Okay, that's a favorite board question. And so the Buccal view of the maxillary second premolar, the mesial ridge of the buccal cusp is shorter than the distal ridge of the buccal cusp. So remember, for the maxillary first premolar is different. Okay, the mesial ridge of the buccal cusp is longer than the distal ridge of the buccal cusp in the maxillary first premolar, but in the maxillary second premolar, the mesial ridge of the buccal cusp is shorter than the distal ridge of the buccal cusp. Keep that in mind. This is opposite as found in the maxillary first premolar. Okay, so mesial view. This is a mesial view of the maxillary second premolar. There is a shallow root concavity on the mesial root. So make sure you know which teeth have root concavities. All right, that is very important. So the maxillary first premolars, the common one, they have two roots, and then maxillary second premolars, the most common type is one root. Okay, and you can appreciate a root concavity on the mesial root. Okay, I mean on the mesial surface. Sorry. Okay, mandibular posterior teeth. All right. So mandibular posterior teeth, when you look in the proximal view and the mandibular posterior teeth, the crown of the mandibular posterior tooth is rhomboidal in shape. Okay, and this relates to the fact that the crown tilts lingually, okay, relative to the long axis of the root. And also, it looks like the rhomboid, because the crown is tilted to the lingual. This is because of the curve of Wilson. Okay, remember when I mentioned in the previous reviews That's why I said you have to look at the review 1, 2, 3 before you get to review number 4. When you look at the review, the curve of Wilson, the crowns of the mandibular teeth incline lingually, and the roots of the mandibular teeth incline to the buccal. Okay. So mandibular first premolar, occlusal view. So it is diamond shaped when you look through in the occlusal. And the large buccal cusp, okay, there's a large buccal cusp and very small lingual cusp. Large buccal cusp and very small lingual cusp. So for this case, sometimes it may appear like a canine because the small lingual cusp may look like a singular. That's another favorite question. Okay, which tooth may look like may resemble a canine? That's the mandibular first premolar. This is a very good both question tooth. Okay, make sure you know it also because it's unique. And the mesiolingual developmental groove is normally present. Okay, so when you look here, this is the mesiolingual developmental groove. Okay, mesiolingual developmental groove. Remember, the maxillary first premolar has a mesial marginal groove. Okay, this one has a mesiolingual developmental groove. Mesiolingual, and it has a distinct transverse ridge. All right, this is a transverse ridge right here. Okay, so make sure you know the maxillary first premolar really well. So in the occlusal view, all right, I need to put a star on this one too. Okay, on the occlusal view, you have the outline is the diamond. Okay, but when you draw a line through the central groove, okay, the central groove is offset to the lingual. Okay, when you draw a line through the central groove is offset to the lingual. And when you draw a line through the cusp tips, okay, meaning the buccal cusp and the lingual cusp tip, the line is going to be offset to the mesial. So, and it's going to give you 4 quadrants. And the smallest quadrant is going to be the mesio-lingual quadrant. And the largest quadrant is going to be the distal buccal. Keep that in mind. So this is the mandibular first premolar. You can appreciate here where the line is. The mandibular first premolar is the only premolar that has distinct bulking to the distal. Okay, so which premolar distinctly bulks to the distal is the mandibular first premolar. Which premolars routinely bulk to the mesial? It's the maxillary first premolars. Okay, so mandibular first premolars, they bulk to the distal. Maxillary first premolars bulk mesial. The mandibular first premolars has a heavy taper on the mesiolingual. Okay, mesiolingual taper. Okay, as you can see, because of the small lingual cusp, so it has because of the small lingual cusp, and also because of the mesiolingual groove. This is the mesiolingual groove right here. Okay. And this is the mesial view of the mandibular first premolar. So the mesial marginal ridge slopes down lingually at 45-degree angle, and it is more cervically located than the distal marginal ridge. As you can see, this is what is being described here. You can see it's almost 45 degrees, okay, sloping. So the mesial marginal ridge slopes down at 45 degrees, and it is more cervically located than the distal marginal ridge, okay? So this is different. Remember when I was reviewing the previous lectures, we say that according to the curve of P, the mesial contact, okay, or mesial marginal ridge is usually a little bit higher than the distal marginal ridge. But the mandibular first premolar are the exceptions, because the mesial marginal ridge is slopes downward at the 45-degree angle, and it is lower than the distal marginal ridge. So this is an exception. You have to know that. Okay. So not more of the occlusal surface can be seen in the mesial view than the distal view. All right. So we're still on the mesial view of the mandibular first premolar. So the lingual cusp is similar in development to the cingulum of a canine. And in the mandibular arch, the greatest lingual inclination of the crown from the root is seen in the mandibular first premolar. Which tooth has the greatest lingual inclination? Okay, in the mandible, it's mandibular first premolars. Now you have to remember this is very high-heeled here, because the crown, you can see the crown is inclined lingually. Okay, so if you are doing a root canal and you go in the crown almost what would you say, parallel to the crown, to the crown itself, you are going to cause perforation, and the perforation is going to be right here. Okay, because you are drilling like this. You are trying to be parallel to the occlusal surface, but if you go in like that, you're going to cause a perforation. Okay, so you have to make sure that you go into the crown, and then once you're inside, your access is going to come this way. You have to change so you don't cause perforation. That's very high-heeled material. Okay, so make sure that you know that the mandibular first premolar has the greatest lingual inclination of the crown from the root. Okay, and the lingual cusp is about 2/3 the height of the buccal cusp. So the lingual cusp is smaller compared to the buccal cusp. Okay, so the mesial view of the mandibular first premolar, as you can see more of the distal, okay, the distal ridge, and you can see that the mesial ridge here is sloped almost 45 degrees. All right, and you do have some grooves here. So the dotted lines show depressions, okay, or concavities. So the mesiolingual developmental groove is seen here, right here. You do have a transverse ridge, so this is a transverse ridge. So this premolar, mandibular first premolar, has a transverse ridge, and you do have root concavities which may occur on the mandibular premolars. So the mesial surface of the root of the mandibular premolar has a root concavity. Okay. And in the proximal view, the buccal cusp tip is almost over the long axis of the tooth. What does that mean? So this is the buccal cusp tip here. And if you draw a line extending to the apex, okay, it's almost parallel. It's almost over the cusp tip, or it's almost over the apex. All right, that's what it means. And mandibular second premolar occlusal view. So the mandibular second premolar has 3 types. Okay, you have the Y type, the H type, and the U type. Okay, so which type is this one? Actually, it's already here. This is the Y type. Okay, and because you can see these grooves here and here, okay, they come like this and they form a Y. You see that? So it's not complicated to see this. Okay, and the U type is just going to look like a U. Okay, so the most common form of the mandibular second premolar is the Y type. That's the most common. All right, and the occlusal outline of the Y type is a pentagon. Okay, remember the other premolars, the occlusal outlines are a hexagon, but this one, the Y type, is a pentagon. Okay, it is the mandibular second premolar is the only tooth that normally has 3 cusps. All right, and from the largest to smallest, you have to know this. From the largest to smallest, the cusps are the buccal cusp, the mesiolingual cusp, and the distolingual cusp. Okay, so the 3 cusps are this one, which is the buccal. You can see that's the largest. And then the second largest is the mesiolingual. So this is the lingual side. This is going to be the mesiolingual here. And then the last one is going to be the distolingual right here. Okay. So make sure you know that. The mandibular second premolar occlusal view. So this is the Y type. Is formed the Y is formed by the central groove and the lingual grooves. So the Y is formed by the central groove, okay, and the lingual groove. So these are the lingual grooves. All right, and the central pit is located, okay, to the mesial and distal pits. All right, the central pit is lingual. Is located lingual to the mesial and distal pits. Another favorite. Okay, because when you look at this pit here and this pit here, they are more to the lingual, okay, when you compare to this one. So the central pit is, sorry, they're not more to the lingual, but they are more to the buccal. And when you draw this, the central pit is here, okay. So, and you can see when you draw lines there and here, you can see that that central pit is in the lingual side. So the central pit in the Y type mandibular second premolar is located more to the lingual than the mesial and distal pits. And the central pit is the deepest of the 3 pits. Okay, and the mesiolingual cusp in the distal view of the mandibular second premolar, the mesiolingual lingual cusp is taller than the distal lingual. And you have here, this one here. I'm going to put a star here, so you know. You have 3 cusps which are visible in the distal view. So when you're in distal view, you see all 3 cusps. Okay. And you have 2 lingual cusps in the mandibular second premolar. The white type, of course. And the central groove of the hue type, okay, is crescent shaped. Another favorite. Okay, this is another favorite. So the U-shaped is a crescent shaped, and the U-type is the rarest. Okay, the rarest form of the mandibular second premolar is the U-shaped premolar, and the mandibular second premolar has more variation in occlusal form than any other tooth. Okay, more variation in occlusal form than any other tooth. Of course, except the third molars. Okay, third molars have a lot of variation, but except for the premolars, then the other tooth which has more variation in occlusal anatomy is the mandibular second premolar. Mandibular second premolar, this is a H type. Okay, so the H mandibular second premolar is more common than the U type. So most common is the Y, and then they followed by H, and then the U. U are rare. Okay, U are rare. U is rare. So U. All right. So U is rare. Okay. So the H mandibular second premolar resembles maxillary premolar. Okay, remember that. And the Buccal view of the mandibular second premolar, you can know that the Buccal cusp tip for the mandibular second premolar is centered mesiodistally. Okay, the Buccal cusp tip is centered. You can see the arrow there, and you come down there, it's almost in the center. Okay, and the mesial and distal ridges, you can see the lines here. Okay, those lines are almost equal or the same length, and the mandibular first and second premolars resemble each other most closely in the Buccal view. Okay, the mandibular first and second premolars resemble each other in the Buccal view. When you go to the lingual, it's a different story, but in the Buccal view, mandibular premolars, they resemble. They have a pentagonal shape. Okay, and the mesial view, okay, of mandibular second premolar, the lingual crest of contour of the mandibular second premolar is located in the occlusal third. The lingual height of contour is located here, which is the occlusal third. All right. Note that's also a favorite question. And the lingual crest of contour of the other teeth is located where? Middle third. You guessed right. Okay. Just remember that we reviewed the height of contours already. Just make sure you go back and review other lectures. Okay. You can listen to these lectures over and over until you memorize each lecture. Okay. All right. And maxillary first molars. So another tool that you're supposed to pay attention. Okay, make sure you know it really well. So on the maxillary first molar, the mesial buccal and the distal buccal. I know the distal buccal, but the mesial buccal and the distal lingual line angles are acute. You have to know which angles are acute, which angles are obtuse. Okay, so the mesial buccal. So which one is mesial? Which one is lingual? This is lingual. This is buccal. Okay, so mesial lingual. So we say that mesial buccal, okay, mesial buccal, this one here. All right, so this angle here, and the distal lingual, it's going to be this one here. Okay, this one. Those are acute. And then you have the obtuse ones, okay? The best way to remember is that these angles are opposite to each other. And so the only one you need, so when you know that, you're going to know that you have to remember in the maxillary first molar, the cusp that you're supposed to remember the most is the mesiolingual cusp, okay? Now, remember that the mesiolingual cusp is the largest cusp of the maxillary first premolar. Of the maxillary first molars. So, it has obtuse angle. So, if the mesiolingual is obtuse, it means the opposite to that, like in the oblique direction, opposite angle is going to be obtuse also. So, that's going to be the distal buccal, okay? So you can always draw like you can draw a square or a rhomboid, whichever you want to remember it, but you can label them lingual, buccal, and then this is going to be distal, mesial, okay? So if you know that your mesiolingual cusp is obtuse, which is this one, then the other opposite angle is also obtuse. So it's going to be this one. Okay. So you have which angles are obtuse? You have distal buccal, DB, and mesiolingual. Easy. You don't have to memorize everything. And then when they ask which one is acute, of course, the ones which are left here are acute. Okay. So that's the easiest way to remember it. All right. So the mesiolingual cusp of the maxillary first molar is the largest and longest cusp in all of the posterior teeth. The largest and longest cusp in all of the posterior teeth is the mesiolingual cusp. Okay, this one. And the maxillary first, another favorite, the maxillary first molar is the widest facial-lingually of any tooth. Okay, facial-lingually, that's the red line. Facial to lingual, the widest tooth is in the mouth. It's the maxillary first molar. Now, when they say distal mesial, the widest tooth is going to be mandibular first molar. Now, when they say mesiodistally, the widest tooth of all anterior teeth is going to be what? It's going to be the maxillary central incisor. Okay. Remember that. Remember those things. Very high-heeled stuff here, okay? Actually, I need to stop saying high-heeled because the whole presentations here and the previous ones are all high-heeled, okay? So from the largest to smallest, the cusps are the mesiolingual, the distolingual, the mesiolingual, the mesiobuccal, the distobuccal, and the distolingual cusps. You have to know which one is the smallest. You have to number them from the smallest to largest and from the largest to smallest. Okay? So the largest one is going to be this one, and the second largest one is going to be the mesiobuccal. Okay? So let's just say the mesiolingual and mesiobuccal are the largest ones. Okay? So 2, and then 3 is going to be the distobuccal. You see that? It's very easy to memorize. And the fourth one is this one. So you're going counterclockwise, okay? You're going like that. Okay. So if you know the mesiobuccal, another triangle again to remember quickly, you know that this is your mesio, this is your lingual, this is your buccal, this is your distal. And then when they say which cusp is the largest, number them in a small. So you start 1 here, and then 2, 3, 4. Very easy to remember, okay? All right. So mandibular second premolars. Actually, this is not supposed to be mandibular second premolar, but it's supposed to be. So scratch this one. And the title here is supposed to be the maxillary first molar. Okay. All right. So this, as you can see from the picture, of course, okay, this is a maxillary first molar. You have the largest mesiolingual cusp here. You have the distal buccal cusp, the distal, the mesiobuccal, the distal buccal here, and you have the distal lingual. Okay. Now, the transverse ridge. You have to know that this tooth has an oblique ridge and a transverse ridge. Okay. If you didn't get that, you have to know that it has the maxillary first molar has a transverse ridge, which is indicated by the green dots over there, and also you have an oblique ridge, which I can draw right here. Okay, this is the oblique ridge. You have to know which cusp form the oblique ridge, and you have to know which cusp form the transverse ridge. And you have to know that there is also a distal lingual groove. This groove here. Okay. This groove is very significant because usually when you're filling the teeth, you have to make sure that also you prepare this groove so you can fill it. Usually it has decay in there. Okay. The oblique ridge, for example, somebody has decay on the occlusal surface of the first premolar. The oblique ridge rarely gets decay. So when you're removing decay and there is some decay in the distal pit and there's some decay in the mesial pit, you can prepare, but do not cross the oblique ridge. There's no need to cross it, okay? Unless there's really too much decay over there, that's when you say, okay, let me cross it. But most of the time, you just leave the oblique ridge intact, and then you prepare the mesial portion and then the distal portion. Okay. Now, the transverse ridge connects the mesial buccal and the mesial lingual cusp. Okay. So the mesial cusps are connected by the transverse ridge. Okay. And then the oblique ridge, okay, is formed by the oblique ridge is formed by the ridge. So this is the distal buccal ridge, okay, this one here. This is a distal buccal ridge of the mesiolingual cusp, because so when you're naming the ridges, you name it to where it's going, where it's sloping. So this ridge is on the mesiolingual cusp, but it's going to the distal buccal. Okay, that's where it's going. It's going this way. So this is distal buccal ridge, the distal buccal ridge of the mesiolingual cusp. And also this one, this ridge here is sloping this way. So this is it's going to the lingual side and it's going to towards the mesial. So this is the mesiolingual ridge of the distal cusp, the distal buccal cusp. Okay. All right. So the transverse is formed by the transverse ridge is formed by the junction of the lingual or triangular ridge of the mesiofacial cusp. Okay. So these are also called triangular ridges. So the transverse ridge, which is here, the ones in green dotted lines here. So the transverse ridge, you name it. So this transverse ridge is called the lingual triangular ridge, okay, because it's of the mesiofacial. Because it's going this way, it's called lingual. Okay, lingual triangular ridge of the mesiofacial cusp, and this one here is going to the buccal. It's slanting to the buccal, so it's called the buccal triangular ridge of the mesiolingual cusp. So make sure you know which one. So make sure you know which ridges form the transverse ridge, and make sure you know which ridges form the oblique ridge. Okay. So oblique ridge, the oblique ridge connects the mesiolingual cusp and the distal facial or distal buccal cusp. So the oblique ridge is this one here, and you can see it's connecting this mesiolingual and this one, which is the distal buccal or distal facial, whatever you want to call it. So it is formed by, as I mentioned in the previous slide, it is formed by the junction of the lingual triangular ridge, okay, because this is going to the lingual, okay, this is going to the lingual triangular ridge. Now there's different ways of naming them, but as long as it's going to the lingual or to the buccal, you can call them triangular ridges, okay. So this is lingual triangular ridge of the distal buccal or distal facial cusp, okay, and the distal, this is going to here, this is going to the distal side, distal buccal, okay, but it's going to the distal essentially, and the distal triangular ridge of the mesiolingual cusp, okay. So make sure you remember that, okay. And these ridges, they meet at the central groove. So the ridges that form the oblique ridge, also the ridges of the transverse ridge, they all meet at the central groove. Now, the ridges that form the oblique ridge, they meet on the level which is even with the marginal ridges. Very high-heeled, okay? These ridges, they meet at this central groove at the level which is even with the mesial marginal ridge and the distal marginal ridge. And so the cusp, okay? So the maxillary first molars has an extra cusp, which is called a cusp of Calabelli. If you have been studying all this long, or you are already a dentist, you should know that these teeth have a cusp of Calabelli, which is indicated by or depicted by the green arrow, okay? The oblique ridge and the distal lingual groove, I told you the distal lingual groove here. This is distal lingual groove are distinct characteristics of the maxillary first molar. So you have to know them. So the distal lingual groove and the oblique ridge are very distinct for the maxillary first molar. On the maxillary molar, the transverse groove of the oblique ridge connects the central and distal pits. You see the red dotted line there? Okay, so this is called a transverse groove, which crosses the oblique ridge, okay, and connects the distal pit and the central pit right there, okay. Very high-heeled tooth here that you're supposed to know. All right. So on the maxillary first molar, you have three major cusps: the mesial buccal, the distal buccal, and the mesial lingual cusp. Okay, and they form what has been described as the primary cusp triangle. Okay, and this primary cusp triangle is very important to understand because that's going to allow you in terms of accessing the pulp during endodontic treatment. And the primary cusp triangle, so when they ask you which cusp on the maxillary first premolar, no, on the maxillary first molar, which cusps form the primary cusp triangle? Okay, and then you can give them the mesial buccal, the mesial lingual, and the distal buccal. All right. So in the cross section, all right, the floor of the pulp chamber is also triangular in shape. All right, in the horizontal cross section, the floor of the pulp chamber is triangular, and the axis in the endodontic axis in this teeth is usually triangular. Okay, and the lingual orifice is distal to the position of the mesiolingual cusp. All right. So the lingual opening is usually distal to the position of the mesiolingual cusp. Okay. Maxillary first molar, this is the buccal view. This view is supposed to know. So in the buccal view, you have the maxillary first molar. If you draw a line from the apex of the palatal root, the line is going to meet with the lingual groove of the maxillary first molar. Okay, so the buccal view of the maxillary first is in line with the apex of the lingual root, the buccal, or the facial groove. Okay, so it's like symmetrical. The apex of the maxillary first molar palatal root is in line with the lingual groove. Okay. Okay, so in the lingual view, the apex of the lingual root, meaning the palatal root, is in line with the mesial-distal diameter midpoint. All right. So the two lines, you can see that the two lines almost meet. They meet here at right angles, and the distance from here to here is almost equal to the distance from here to here. Okay. So it's in the lingual view, the line drawn from the apex of the root meets meets the line extending from the mesial to distal at the midpoint. All right, so this is the lingual view of maxillary first premolar. So when you are comparing the facial and the lingual surfaces of the maxillary and mandibular molars, the surface most likely to have a fissured groove is the lingual surface of maxillary molars. Okay, and the distal lingual groove is an identifying characteristic of maxillary molars. They have a distal lingual groove. Okay. Mandibular molars, they don't have the lingual grooves. So you have to know that. So for the Buccal view of the maxillary first molar, the roots, they are flared more than the roots of the second or the third molars. Okay, you have to remember that. So roots are more flared, and the palatal root is more visible than in the second molar. You are going to see when we see on when you look at the second molars that the roots are almost closed. Okay, so the palatal root is more visible than in the second molar because of the flaring of the roots. The distal lingual cusp peaks from behind the distal cusp, the distal buccal cusp, due to rhomboid occlusal shape. Okay. So you can see that this is the buccal view, but you can still see the lingual cusps. You see that this one and this one. You can still see part of them. Okay, so that's why it means that the distal lingual cusp peaks from the behind the distal buccal cusp due to the rhomboid occlusal shape. And also the maxillary the maxillary first molars, when you look in the lingual view, so the palatal root has a concavity. Okay, the palatal, so this tooth in the lingual view, the palatal root has a root concavity. Okay, so you have to remember that. And the concavity on the fascia of the lingual root has been described. All right. So on the facial surface of the lingual root, you can also see a concavity. Okay. So palatal root has concavities both on the lingual and also on the facial. Okay. All right. Facial lingual taper. Facial lingual taper. Okay. I put a star there. So for the mandibular first molars, occlusal view. Okay. So facial to the central groove. Here's a central groove here. So facial to the central groove, the mesial and distal surfaces are parallel. Okay. Facial. So this is a facial or buccal, and this is lingual. And you can see that the red lines, which are facial to the central groove, they are almost parallel. Okay. Now, in the blue lines, you can see that if you extend the blue lines, you go like this, you can see that the lines are going to converge somewhere. Okay. So this is called lingual convergence. Okay. So the facial lingual taper begins at the central groove and extends lingually. So extends from the central groove here, this here goes this way. Okay. So, and they're going to converge right here. So that's called convergence of the proximal surfaces. So mandibular first molars, they show facial lingual taper. Okay. Now you also have reverse facial lingual taper. Reverse facial lingual taper is seen. Let me go back. So reverse facial lingual taper is seen in the maxillary first molars. Okay. And also it's seen in the mandibular second premolars. So you have to remember that. So the reverse facial lingual taper is exhibited in maxillary first molars and mandibular second premolars. The lingual half of the tooth is wider than the facial half, and the facial half of the proximal surface converges towards the buccal. Okay. And these are represented by the green line. Okay, so the green goes with the green here, and the red goes with the red. Okay. So you can see that here, if you extend the green lines, they're going to meet somewhere. Okay, they're going to converge. So this is the lingual surface. Hold on a minute, let me see. No, this is the facial surface, because this is your mesial lingual. So this is going to be the lingual. So you can see that these are going to converge. So the reverse facial lingual taper, meaning they're going to converge to the buccal. So another way of saying reverse facial lingual taper is lingual to facial taper. So instead of facial to lingual, this is lingual facial, because you are going from the lingual to facial, and they're going to converge. They're going this way. Okay. So lingual facial taper or reverse facial lingual taper. Okay, so the maxillary second molars, the most common type of maxillary first and second molars, they have rhomboidal outline in the occlusal view, and the rhomboidal form of the maxillary second molar is the most common type, and the crown is narrower mesiodistally than the maxillary first molar crown, and this is because due to the smaller distal buccal and the distal lingual cusps. Okay, make sure you know the reason why it's smaller. So you have smaller distal buccal and distal lingual cusps. More on the maxillary second molars. So the heart-shaped form of the maxillary second molar is second most common type, okay, or most common variation. So most common variation of the maxillary second molar is heart-shaped, all right. And the distal lingual cusp is sometimes completely missing. And if it's completely missing, sometimes it looks like a third molar. Okay. And the back of your maxillary second molar, the mesial buccal cusp is larger than the distal buccal cusp, and the palatal root is somewhat visible between the M. So as you can see, the roots are almost fused together, so you can't see much of the palatal root, and the roots are less flared than the first molar. Okay. So when you're studying these, you have to know the comparisons between the first molars, second molars, and the third molars. The mesial view of the maxillary second molar, there's some fluting of the root concavity. So fluting is root concavity is on the proximal surface of the mesial buccal root. So you have to know which roots have root concavities. Okay. When you compare to the first maxillary molar, the second maxillary molar does not have a cusp of Carabelli. The distal view, maxillary right second molar. So you have a small distal buccal root. There's no cusp of Carabelli, and another one, and all four cusps are visible in the distal view. Okay. All right, third molars. So the most common type of the third molar is the heart-shaped form. All right, you should be able to remember that. And this is the same variation of the second molar. So remember, the most common variation in mandibular maxillary second molars is the heart-shaped. Okay, but the most common form of the maxillary third molars is heart-shaped. So the third molars, the roots are more convergent than the second molar, and the mesial buccal cusp is larger than the distal buccal cusp. So this slide here distinguishes the maxillary first, second, and third molars. So the best way is to distinguish between maxillary first, second, and third molars deals with the size of the distal lingual cusp and the position of the distal lingual groove. You have to remember that, okay? As you progress distally, the distal lingual cusp becomes smaller and the distal lingual groove moves distally, as you can see in the picture. All right, here we have a distal lingual cusp. Here we have a smaller distal lingual cusp, and then here on the third molar, it's missing. Okay. Mandibular first molars. So from the mandibular first molars, we discussed already, they develop from 5 lobes. Okay. So these two, the mandibular first molars and the mandibular second molars, so second premolars, white type, they both develop from 5 lobes, as we reviewed earlier. And from the largest to smallest of the mandibular first molar, the cusps are mesial buccal, mesial lingual, distal buccal, and the distal cusp. You have to know how to number them, okay, in order. Which one is the biggest, which one is the smallest. Okay. And this tooth is the widest mesiodistally of any tooth. Okay, this is what I mentioned earlier. In an occlusal view, the mandibular first molar is pentagonal. Okay. In the occlusal view, it's a pentagon. Remember also the mandibular first molar occlusal view is a pentagon. Okay. So sometimes the national board they put trapezoidal as an option. So you have to keep that in mind. Mandibular first molars, so The distal cusp is set to the lingual, okay, compared to the other two buccal cusps. And yeah, in the proximal view, this is a proximal view from the distal surface. You can see that also the distal cusp here is lingual to these other cusps, which is the buccal cusp. Okay, so this is the buccal, this is lingual. Okay, so the distal cusp is more lingual than the rest of the buccal cusps. The lingual view of maxillary of the mandibular first molar. So in the lingual view, you can see three buccal cusps. Okay, so you can see three buccal cusps in the lingual view. You have this one here, you have this one here, and you have this one. Okay, so you can see all 5 cusps in the lingual view, which is the favorite board question. Okay, all right, so the mandibular first molars, interestingly enough, it has so many cusps, but it doesn't have any transverse ridges. So no transverse ridges on the mandibular first molars. You have to keep that in mind. So a transverse ridge is when these triangular ridges meet, but when you draw these lines here, and this one, you can see they don't meet anywhere. Okay, so those are not transverse ridges. Okay, no transverse ridges, no transverse ridge. And so the mandibular second molar. So the mandibular second molar is the most symmetrical tooth, okay, and has the simplest anatomy of all permanent molars. Okay, and the mesiobuccal cusp is normally the largest, and the distal lingual cusp is normally the smallest. The 4 cusps are approximately equal in size. Okay, so they are almost equal. So it's almost like a square or a rectangle on the occlusal view. But when you try to look into the sizes, so the smallest is usually the distal lingual cusp. Okay, and this tooth here has some tapering also. So the mandibular second molar has it has a mesial to distal taper. So you can see the mesial side is wider and the distal side is narrower. So you have a mesial to distal tapering. Okay. So therefore the crown is widest in the facial lingual. So facial lingually, the crown is widest in the mesial third, because it's tapering from the mesial to the distal. So that means the mesial side is wider than the distal. So the best way to distinguish between the mandibular first and second molars is the number of cusps. Yeah, because the first has 5, the second has 4. Very easy, right? So there's 3 primary deflumbinal grooves on the mandibular second molar, and they are called the central groove, the buccal groove, and the lingual groove. So due to the groove pattern, there is a class 1 cavity preparation on the lower second molar has been compared to a plus sign. You see those lines here. You have the green line, the red line, and the blue line. they meet. Those are the grooves, and they meet and they form a plus sign. So when you're preparing removing cavities, it looks like a plus sign that you made as a preparation. Okay, very important question there. And the mandibular second molar, so it has mandibular second molar. So the mandibular first molar has no transverse ridges, but mandibular second molar has two transverse ridges, and they are found in they are found in the mandibular second premolars. You have a transverse ridge, which is junction of two triangular ridges. So this is the definition of a transverse ridge. Make sure you know it. And the transverse ridges are not as distinct as that found on the mandibular first premolar. Remember, mandibular first premolar has a transverse ridge connecting the buccal and the lingual cusp, even though the lingual cusp can be smaller. Okay. And so when you look on mandibular second molar, you have four cusps, okay, which are approximately equal, and they are all visible in the facial view. Okay, so in the lingual view, you can see all five cusps of the mandibular first molar, and this one in the facial view or the buccal view, you can see all four cusps. This is a favorite question. Okay, so make sure you know it. And the lingual cusps are taller than the buccal cusps, and usually there's distal root deflection, meaning the roots they deflect to the distal. So mandibular second molars. Okay. So this is another favorite board question. So there's a number of cusps visible in the lingual view is only two: the mesial lingual and the distal lingual. So when you go to the lingual view, because the cusps are more straight, or the lingual surface is more straight in the mandibular second molars, on the lingual view you can only see the lingual cusp. You cannot see the buccal. However, when you're in the lingual, on the mandibular first molar, you can see the lingual cusp, and also you can see the buccal cusp. So all five cusps are seen in the lingual. Okay. All right, and this is the distal view of the mandibular second molar. So you can see the mesial root is larger than the distal root, and there's a sharper apex of the distal root, and you can normally see all four cusps in the distal view. So you have to know which views you can see all cusps. Okay. There's no distal cusp or distal buccal groove when you compare to the first mandibular molar. Okay, the third molars. So the most common form of mandibular third molar has four cusps and two roots, and the central fossa is the shallowest of the permanent molars. So very shallow central fossa. Okay. All right, this is the end of the review. So there's look out for the review. This was a review number. This was number 4. So we're going to do number 5. Okay, and then number 6. All right. So make sure you review other videos first before you proceed. Okay, and you can watch over and over until you memorize this.